I'm Scott Horsburgh. Welcome to Yelling Up Steading. This DVD is all about how to get the perfect long grain edge joint, as we would use when gluing up a solid tabletop or sideboard top. I'm going to show you the very basic techniques to enable you to get that perfect joint so that you see no glue line. I'm then going to show you one of the techniques on how you can fix a solid top to a carcass so that it will not split, so that you are enabling it to have free movement yet still be fixed firmly and securely. I think you're going to get a lot out of this today, so let's get started. When it comes to long grain joinery, if you prepare the edges correctly, you don't need to use biscuits, dowels or dominoes or things like that. The long grain of the timber is a very strong glue joint, and as mentioned, if we prepare this joint properly, it will hold itself together and it will be so strong that it will never pull apart. There is a method for doing this, and the main way that furniture makers get their long grain joinery to be perfect is by creating a very small hollow along the length. Now, when I was studying with David, he would also have a very slight hollow across its width, and that was really just to ensure that top and bottom, the outside edges were the only ones that were touching. No bumps at all, nothing to hold the joint off. So in my second DVD on hand planing and shooting techniques, I did demonstrate freehand shooting and shooting of veneers, and it's exactly the same concept as with something like a tabletop or a sideboard top. We're looking to hollow the length, and if we can, even hollow the width. But the main thing is to hollow the length, and as long as we have our length slightly hollowed and nice square cuts off our plane, we're going to get the perfect join. When I say hollow the length, I'm going to just zoom in and show you this top, because I've actually just exaggerated a hollow in the length of this top just to show you what I'm talking about. And when I say a hollow along the length, it's so that the outside ends will touch and there's a very slight hollow in the middle. So theoretically, when it comes to clamping these two boards together, theoretically we could clamp this with just one clamp, because if the two outside ends are touching and there's a slight hollow but they're perfectly square, when we come to clamp this, if I just put a clamp across the middle and pulled that nice and tight, the rest of it is going to be tight as well. So in theory I could clamp this with one clamp, but I will probably use 3 or 5 just to be safe. Not that I need them, but I will anyway. So on this top, if I just try and push this together a little bit, you can pretty much see how it's touching here at the back end, and it's also touching here at the front end, yet you can see a gap of about 2 mil in the middle. Now that is too wide, but it's just to demonstrate the concept and to show you what I'm talking about. If we get these pretty much straight, and having a slight hollow it's not perfectly straight. It has a very minuscule hollow, and for two boards like this, I'll probably aim for maybe 0.5 mil hollow in the middle. That's to ensure we have no bumps. If I was to take this straight from the saw or the machine planer, there's always those little ridges that you know are there, because when you go to hand plane this joint, or hand plane this edge, sorry, you know that the first 4 or 5 shavings, it's just chattering along and taking the high spots. And then eventually you get a clean shaving. But you could see that if I was to clamp this across the middle and pull this tight, the rest of it would follow. And that is how we get a perfect long grain edge joint. And we know that long grain is a very strong glue joint, especially long grain to long grain. So by getting that perfect and clamping them, we don't need dominoes and biscuits. It will be super strong. What I may end up doing is just maybe having a domino here and a domino there, just as locators, so that I can get these end to end perfect. Not for strength, just as locators. So now I'm going to prepare the 2 long grain sides of these 2 boards, and we're going to glue them up. There's a number of ways you could do this. If your bench is long enough, like mine is, you could freehand shoot these, and it's so easy. It's exactly the same as what I demonstrated on the draw side of the veneers on shooting and planing techniques. You would just take some hollowing shavings and then a couple of through full shavings, and that's all there is to it. But I am actually going to set these up in my vise so you can see what I'm doing, and I'm going to plane the edge along the top. And all it is when you are planing an edge is check it with your straight edge for flatness. We don't want bumps. Use your squares to check along its width, and if you mark off with a pencil where it's high or a little bit out of square, with your hand plane and a fine shaving, you can take wood only where you need to. It's not difficult. So here is my setup for planing this long grain edge. I've got the front held firmly in my vise, and I just have a clamp across the bench at the other end, so it's nice and firm. And what I am looking to do is use my straight edge, and I only have one that's 1 metre long. That's my longest straight edge. And this is just going to tell me how hollow I am, and if I pop it on, I can see that my hollow is a bit great. It's too much. So to start with, I'm going to plane these 2 ends down, front and back down a little bit, until I'm happy, and then I'll just take some through shavings. I have a small square, and I'm also obviously looking for it to be nice and square. Now if you have a curved blade in your plane, as I do, and I showed you how to prepare a curved blade in the DVD on preparing your hand plane, your chip breaker and your blade, you can also get a hollow across the width. That's what I was talking about earlier. So that when you put your square on, the square will touch on each side of this edge, and you might just have a slight dip. Now a slight dip is just a ray of light, just a glow under that square. It's negligible. And if you have it, that's fine. If you don't, it doesn't matter. It's okay. A lot of makers don't use curved blades, so they can't get a hollow. If it's perfectly square and perfectly flat, that's fine. The main thing we're looking for is no bumps along this edge and its length, so that we can get this sweep. So the procedure is to just check and mark off with a pencil. If it's a little bit out here, just put a little nick there so that you know as you're approaching, you can just maneuver your plane and take that edge off. But I'm just going to concentrate on the front back edges and take it down. Another point to note is that you will most likely be preparing your initial square edge off your machine planer. So if you set your fence nice and square, you're really minimising the amount of hand planing that you have to do, because your edge should already be square coming off the planer, and all you've got to do is remove the machine ripple and put a slight hollow. So I have a nice fine blade set. I'm reasonably happy with the squareness across the width. There's nothing that's jumping out at me as being radically out of square. So as I mentioned, front and back end, to just try and reduce this hollow. This piece is nice and wide. It's just under an inch, so it's very easy to balance the hand plane. They're nice thin shavings. Now after you've done a few, you can just check regularly. And with just what I've done, I also just like to check that I'm not introducing out of squareness where I'm planing. As I mentioned, it's nice and wide, so it's very easy to keep your plane balanced. It's looking pretty good. The hollow is just still a little bit too great. Okay, I might just try and take some through shavings, which I don't think I'll be able to do because of the hollow. There you go, it's just missing the middle bit and taking the end. And that's because the hollow is too great in the middle. And that's fine. I can see about 1/4 of a millimetre of light under the centre of this ruler, and I'm pretty happy with that. So all I'll do now is check it for squareness. I'm a little bit off there, so I need to take a little bit off that outside. Off the outside. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So with this piece now, I'm happy with the hollow in the length, but I've just crept in a little bit off, I've lost a little bit of squareness across the width. So from here to here, it's fine, it's square across its width. But when it comes to this end here, I just need to take a little bit more wood off this side and then continue straight through. So I'm just going to start the plane over on this side a little bit and then bring it back to centre. So I'm just taking my right hand side of that, then I'm going to bring it back to centre and take it right through. One more. Okay, that's looking very nice. So that is all it is with long grain joinery. It's just a matter of constantly checking to make sure that you're not losing squareness and just taking wood where you need to take wood and creating that very slight hollow. I'm going to do exactly the same on the other face edge of the other board, and then we're going to glue these up. What I am going to do to help me locate these two and keep them level is I am going to put a domino at each end and one in the centre, not for strength, just as locators to help me keep them level on the top and level at each end, so I'm not getting any sliding motion. And that is it. Then I'm going to shape the top, cut the top to size, shape it, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to fix it to the sideboard in a manner that will keep it firmly fixed but allow it to move, because this is a very wide top and it's going to change its width with the humidity of the seasons. I want to show you the planing of this other board, because at each end I'm square, but I need to take a lot more off my side here through the trunk of this than here, so you'll be able to see how I move the plane. So I'm starting central at each end to keep that shaving square, and then when I get about 7 inches in, you can see that I'm moving the plane across towards me, so that all I'm taking is a shaving off my side. Yeah, it's half a shaving, and then I just centre it again. And that's how you can true things up. So I'm starting centre, veering over towards me, just taking off my edge, and then veering back. And that's how I'm going to true up the squareness across the width here. So there you can see how that gap has now decreased in size. It's touching at each end, both boards are touching at each end, and there is about a 1/2 mil hollow, so that when I pull this in nice and tight, these two ends are going to compress. I'm going to get a lovely tight joint that will never come apart. It is also important for me to let you know that just like every other piece in this piece of furniture, both of these pieces were planed up and checked for wind, because if I don't remove any wind that may be present in these pieces, when I glue these together, it's not going to sit flatly on the sideboard. And if I have to put pressure on it to pull it down, this whole top is going to be under tension, and then that's going to put tension on the whole carcass. I don't want that. I just want it to sit nicely, touching all of the outside edges. And when I put the buttons on to hold it in place, which I'll show you later, I don't want any tension. When you prepare a top like this, your face side would be your underside face and your face edge would be your joining edge. And the top, as I've done here, you can just take a few through shavings to clean it up, and when it's all put together, you can then plane it flush. I'm lucky with this top in that when I put these together in a manner that I'm happy with, colour-wise, grain-wise and everything, the grain direction on both of these top boards will be going this way, so that I can just plane straight down this join to clean this up. If I found that on one board the grain was going in the opposite direction, I would use my scraper plane to just very carefully plane that join, because in one direction I'd be going with the grain and on the other board I would be going against the grain. But now I'm just going to put 3 dominoes in here as locators, and then I'm going to glue this up. So this is my glue up procedure for the top. I've just buttered it together dry again so you can see that it's touching at either end and there's a nice small hollow in the middle. So I've got the clamps all set. I've just prepped for 3 dominoes as locators. I'm just using PVA. I'm going to roll the glue on the edges with a roller and use a brush to just make sure I get some glue into the mortises for the dominoes, and the hammer's just to bang the dominoes in. Then I'm going to, when I get it together, I'm going to lay it down on these clamps, and the first clamp that I will put on will be one in the middle, to pinch it in the middle, and then, as I mentioned, theoretically I shouldn't need any other clamps, but I will just use the 2 underside clamps at either end. And then I'm just going to check it and make sure that I've got it nice and flat, and that is it. This just helps me to get a nice even spread. just making sure that I'm covering those mortises nicely. They are over width, so I'm not worried about too much about damaging any of these ends because I need to trim those. I'm just going to get these in a little bit. I'm going to take them the whole way. Central clamp on. Clamp that I want to bring home first. Just get that one tight. And you can almost see how bringing that one tight has forced squeeze out at either end. It's because of that compression. I'm just going to wipe a little bit of this glue away in spots because I want to put a straight edge across so that I can check it for flatness. And these boards, I took a little bit more off one of the face sides so that there's a little bit of a variation in thickness, but that is okay. Because I'm going to hand plane these. That's not too bad. I am going to be hand planing these so that they're perfectly flush, and if I need to just take a little bit off the underside to ensure that it's sitting tightly, it's only going to be 2 or 3 shavings and that's fine. I'm now going to show you how I'm going to be fixing this top to the sideboard. When we fix a top like this, solid wood, we have to allow it to move. If I fix this rigidly with screws, for example, and I don't allow this top to expand and contract with the changes in the equilibrium moisture content of the air, it's going to split, and I don't want that to happen. So I need to fix this to the carcass in a manner that enables it to expand and contract with the variances, with the humidity in the seasons. And I'm going to now show you how I'm going to do that. I am using a method called traditional shrinkage buttons, which actually fix the top to the carcass very firmly and securely, but still allow it to move. I'm going to zoom in and show you the layout of the traditional shrinkage buttons that I am using. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 along the back and 4 along the front, and then 3 down each side, and I'm using them to secure the top. Because the grain of the top is running lengthways, it's going to change its dimension from front to back. So these buttons along the front and the back slide in and out, and these ones on the side slide front to back that way. I haven't been concerned about the overhang at the top or the back changing slightly, so I've elected to fix the top straight down the centre on the join and allow each piece to move like this. If I wanted to keep the overhang at the top constant, I could have fixed it at the front and allowed the whole thing to move this way, but I wasn't too concerned. I don't mind if it creeps in 2-3 mil on the front and on the back. So here is one here on the back that you can see is a nice tight fit sideways, and all it does is it moves in and out. The top of the button is 1 mil below the top of this spacer frame on the carcass where the top sits, so it can just pull up slightly when it's screwed and bite on the top. We are just coming into winter in Australia, so I don't want this to be pushed hard up against this frame, because I still need to allow it to move further out this way. So all I've done when setting these in is I have just placed a 3 mil wide piece of wood, so that when I've slotted that in, it's actually sitting 3 mil inward, so it can still move this way. I placed all of the buttons in their holes, and like I just mentioned, I had the ones along the front and the back just sitting inwards by 3 mil, so that I could allow for some further expansion as winter takes hold. I then placed the top onto the top of the carcass and got it in exactly the right position, and then I just placed 2 clamps, one on the front and one on the back. And then using my awl, I just popped my awl through the hole in each button, so that I could just create a slight indent on the underside of the base, so that I could drill that tapping hole for the screw that goes through these buttons. As I mentioned, I haven't been concerned about the top changing its overhang from front to back, so I've elected to fix it straight down the middle. So this one here has no sideways movement, but these ones front and back can slide forwards and backwards, so they will allow the top to move. They're overhanging a little bit because I need to clear the kicker for the draw, but they slot in there and they're nice and firm, but they still can slide easily, front to back. So I am allowing for plenty of movement. If I wanted to keep the overhang at the top constant, I would fix it at the front and allow all of the movement through here. So I've drilled the tapping holes in the top, and now all I need to do is just really pop the top on the carcass and screw all of the buttons into the top. Now, the design of this piece, these two central backs will not be glued in. They will be fixed, but they won't be glued in. I'm going to allow them to always be taken out. And that is just so that you can come in from the back to fix these buttons. And if something ever happens to the top or somebody wants to change the top, it's easy to get access to undo these buttons here. With these larger drawers, you've got plenty of room to come in through the drawers to the back, but these ones are a bit narrow. So I'm just going to place the top on and screw it down, and that's it. That is how we glue long grain joinery and how we can fix a top to a sideboard or a coffee table or a table or anything. I hope you've enjoyed this DVD on how to get perfect long grain joinery and how to attach something like a solid top to a carcass.